Happy Martin Luther King Day to you, folks. This is Shippy the Explorer coming to you with another tape of, just videos. Just today we talk about general topic. I was just in the office today and just doing some work, and I just thought about you and said I should be releasing a tape pertaining to Martin Luther King Day. Welcome to Shippy the Explorer, and when you see me these days, you're broadcasting or videoing from College Park, Maryland. But today I'm inside the house and just thought about the fact that we have come this far based on a lot of folks. And I was up here in this office doing, starting every time. It's a tradition that I start my tax year. If you look in the background, you see the tax papers all over the place. It's a tradition that it seems like I start the tax process on this day. But it's also a day to reflect on the contribution of Martin Luther King that we have done. But I was just listening to a Go vlogger, and they was talking about the history of where we have come from in this hemisphere. And I said maybe I should come upstairs and maybe introduce some books to you, because the whole idea of incarceration and freedom didn't just start here. It started way back in even before colonial times. And then I had the great opportunity when I went to Ghana. I was able to purchase a book called, and I take this book from my shelf, The Indigenous Slavery of Ghana from the 15th to the 19th century by Okoso Adoma Purby. And if you have an opportunity to get this book, you can get it, because that book revealed to me that before we had Great Triangular slavery, there was a tremendous amount of indigenous slavery taking place in the especially in Ghana and West African region, but I'm sure they were also being done in other parts of the continent of Africa. And Africa, before the colonial period, it was a lot. The empires of Ghana and so forth, they were different. So when colonial people came, and the Portuguese and the Spanish came down, and later on the English came, they started to divide up the continent, well, among themselves in terms of trade and all that. And then later on, they had the Great Division. The Europeans came in. The Berlin Conference that divide up Africa. But what I want to say to you today is that as African Americans and even Americans of all, I could say races and culture, all we are now sitting on the fact that we have got a great many people who came before us. And when you talk about the history of America, a lot of people jump right to the George Washington and all that. But before that, before George Washington, we had the history of Europe and Africa that was there. And then later, and that sometimes the Europeans came down and strayed to the west and also the east coast of Africa and started trade. But in the African continent, we had, what I want to point out today is that the indigenous slavery existed to a great extent. I the general history that I got out of this book is that tribes would attack each other, and because of one reason for the next, maybe for territorial reasons or for tribal reasons. But when there was a great slavery movement where the Arabs would come down into the continent of Africa, and they would capture slaves, and they would take them into the Arabia's region and all of that. And that existed. But the Arabs, on a certain extent, they would somewhat marry into the African family. But within the African regions, the indigenous slavery, doing tape. I'm doing a tape. Yeah. The indigenous slavery was conducted by different, say for instance, the king of Ghana, and they would send out and raid other tribes, and then they would bring these people to their village or kingdom, and then they would work them. And then some people were sold off to the Arabs. And so because of the Arab raid in the region, and also the kings of the various regions, they would raid other places also, and the excess amount of labor, they would sell them off. So that slavery existed. So now when the Europeans came in, there was a foundation of slavery established already. It was established already. So the Arabs, on a greater sense, now realize that they could capture these people. Instead of sending them north, they would ship them to the west coast of Africa and sell them. And from this indigenous slavery book, I got the idea that most of the slaves would come through the north, west, and east, and then they trickled down through Kumasi in Ghana, and then the king of Kumasi region, he would demand his share. You couldn't just pass through Kumasi and don't pay the royalties to the king. And that, when I learned that, it was really sad. So what I'm doing is that I'm reflecting on the fact that years after now, it's Martin Luther King came around. But before Martin Luther King, we have had many people before him. We have had the fact that the great freedom movement by in England to eradicate slavery, and Wilberforce and his team. We have had some of the freedom fighters in the Jamaican region, Nancy and Kojo and all that, and they have been fighting for freedom. And then Marcus Garvey, Mosiah Garvey came up through the movement, and then he introduced the fact that we need to recognize Africa has our core base, and we are people who didn't necessarily were slaves back then. A lot of us were free. So the fact that, but when the triangular trade came in, it started first in the Caribbean islands, and then it trickled little by little, especially under the British, when the British realized that the Portuguese and the French, well, mainly the Portuguese and and the Spaniards were making a lot of money out of this trade. The English jumped in and they went into West Africa and they started to try to capture the slave stations, the ports or the forts, and that was a period of time when they really wanted to get into the money making machine. And so they were successful in capturing a few of the forts. And so they got in the trade. But on the Wilberforce, by 18, up in, well, 1808, the slave trade eventually stopped because Wilberforce, as a member of the government of Great Britain, he realized that it wasn't a good thing. So he fought and fought until 1808, the slave trade stopped. He didn't even realize, he didn't even live to see that freedom that happened. But eventually, the British slave trade started in the Caribbean, man, and it's picked up countries like Barbados, and then the idea of the British spread into, say, Jamaica. The Spaniards controlled Jamaica up until 1655, and then when the British came in and captured that, then they had more land. Barbados is a small country, and now they had more land. 1655 they captured Jamaica, and now the plantation were became big productions, and so they wanted more slaves, and so well again they brought in slaves until 1808 when that's the actual trade stopped. But by then the Americas, the other parts, like the northern parts of the Americas, were also exposed to slavery, and so by then the whole idea, they brought the slave codes and imprisonment codes from Barbados and brought it into the Americas, and they used that to open up the St. James Valley, which is not Virginia, Alabama, Mississippi, and all that region. The first 13 colonies, they didn't say, okay, we're not going to have it. They jumped into the slave program also, folks. But we're coming back into Marcus Garvey. The guys from Marcus Garvey came up into the Americas, and he introduced the whole idea of self recognition and independence, and this was after slavery now, that we are people too. We're not we shouldn't act like slaves. We are free, and we are bright people, and we should act accordingly, Yes. And that Marcus Garvey brought that idea. He came in and said that Africa should be for the Africans, and he had the Back to Africa movement and all that, And out of his idea, that the NAACP institution was established, the Great Niagara movement, So from Marcus Garvey, we have gotten some ideas from great guys. So we are standing on the shoulders of Wilberforce. We are standing on the shoulder of Marcus Garvey. We are standing on the shoulder of Nani. We are standing on the shoulders of Kojo. We are standing on with Sam Sharp, all those guys. And you have had other disturbance in the Caribbean islands, and some of your islands would remember your story. And then we are standing on the shoulder of well, I said Marcus Garvey, and eventually we come to the period of today when we are standing on the shoulder of Martin Luther King. Well, Malcolm X also did a bit of thing. And if you look, and also Frederick Douglass, we have Frederick Douglass book here. He was a slave, and so all these guys, as Frederick Douglass and all that. So what I'm saying is that the whole idea of reaching this point where Martin Luther King, with the freedom fighters and all that, and were eventually able to help us, the government of the United States, pass the civil rights laws. And this law was a barrier between what they had before, the slave Jim Crow laws, the vagrancy laws, the fact that even before that, you as slaves you had to walk around with your paper if you were a free slave, or you even had to walk around with a paper to say which plantation you were from. And to come to this day, now that, remember, you probably don't know, but the current climate of this country, hundreds of us who are actually American citizens and from the diaspora are actually walking around with our passports and our driver's license and some form of ID to show that we are Americans and we should be part of this thing, and we should be free to live accordingly good lives and support the country. Martin Luther King died because when he died, a lot of people didn't like him. A lot of people didn't like him. A lot of people don't realize that Martin Luther King became unpopular because of the things he was talking about. Maybe he had a popularity of maybe 30%, and the rest of it was people were against him. But he was advocating for the people in this country and the world that we should be dignified. We are citizens. And to see that this current atmosphere, I'm trying to stay away from the politics, is that we are now walking around with paper. How many, especially the ones who are brown and black and look slightly different from the normal European looking thing, we are walking around the paper. We have gone back to the 1800s, the early 19th century. We have gone back to the late 17th century, where we have walking around with paper to identify, and to see that that same paper, in many of the cases right now, are being ignored. Whether you have your ID on your telephone or in your computer or in a file or in your pocket, and it's being denied. No, this is the day when Martin Luther King says we should be dignified. There come a time when we shouldn't be judged by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character. The content of our character. So it's important that even if we are trying to clean up the hills, or the hills of this country, we should actually be doing it in a dignified way. Dignified way that you are, even if you're confronted, sir, can you identify who you are, if you're a citizen or not? Yes, you say, okay, I'm a citizen of this country, and have been, a naturalized citizen or was born here, it shouldn't be. Well, actually, they shouldn't even confront you like that. The first list of thing is where you go into the records and you find the ones that were troublemakers. If you come to this country, this great country, and you are not behaving yourself, then that's on the fault, your fault. You know, if you want to break the laws or something, then the country is right to say you can go. But if you just walking, if the authorities just walking around and just picking up and confronting every citizen that looks non-European, and that's a naive thing. Who are the Europeans? We have Europeans who are dark skinned. We have Europeans who are light skinned. We have Europeans who are, you know, different. I mean, all mixture of things. So how can you judge and come to the conclusion that that person is, I'm going to confront that person? So Martin Luther King's, the idea of we being free and prosperous and should be dignified in this country, it's really, really a setback in what's happening in the country, in this world. And talk about the world is in turmoil, folks. It's in turmoil. You can't, if you really take a map and look at the countries, there's war in the Middle East. There's war in parts of Europe. There's war in the Asian region. There is tension around China and also other things. There is tension and war and thing going on in the South American region. And within the countries, then there's a set where people are misjudging and distrusting each other. So there the tension is on in this world, based on the atmosphere of the general operation of certain groups of people and certain groups of country. And that's on Martin Luther King saying. That's on Martin Luther King. He wasn't for that. He was for the good that's in you. Let me get into a light where you can see. Yeah. Yeah, so as we let's get yeah. So okay. So the light is not coming on, but yeah, we can continue. So I have the mindset, a ship of the explorer, saying, I bring you greetings today, that on this day I wish you well. Let's see if we can get some more light in this place. Wish you well on Martin Luther King's Day. And if you had done some service, it has revolved now, or evolved from just worship and talking and praying and all sort of things. Because sometimes when you're just praying, I pray too, but sometimes when you're praying and looking, you should pray with one eye open. Pray with one eye open, because you should be looking out for the trauma, the ills of what's happening to you, And so I wish that we take this time to use, to reflect, to rest, if you will, to rest in Martin Luther King. And if you feel moved to volunteer, to do something good, and if you feel like expressing yourself, use this day to express yourself that this is a day that we are all human beings. We are part of the human race, and we should be dignified and live, allowed to live a decent life. Once you are within the laws of the country, irrespective of which country you are, just live a decent life. And if you take this day also to support others, then that's what you're doing. You're bettering the environment, the social environment in which you live. You're bettering, doing better. You're creating a chain reaction of positivity, and you are doing your work. And if you want to just walk around your neighborhood and reflect on where we have come this far on this Martin Luther King's Day, then it's also good too. It's also good. And then if you are a professional and you can help those who are in incarcerated situation, or you can advise others in your community of how to approach the cases that are coming up, that people are being confronted with, then it's also good. You can be an instrument of healing. You can be an instrument of social reformation. And so on this day, Martin Luther King's Day, I would say we should set our mind from the days when we were slaves, ancestors were slaves and have no freedom, to now the present time when we are free and educated and smart. We're always smart, but you're talking about book knowledge, and book knowledge is different from common sense or from general knowledge. And so on this day, we are saying, Shippy the Explorer is saying, reflect on what we have achieved, where we have come, and don't be afraid. If you're within the law, you're living within the law, don't be afraid of walk around your society with your heads held high. Be dignified. You never see Martin Luther King looking raggy or strangling. I think he did smoke, if I'm not mistaken, but not. There's no. He didn't demonstrate being a rude person. It's always the positivity. So, on this day, Shippy the Explorer is saying, I wish you the best of life. If you can get into the library and get some of these books and read, educate yourselves so that you have a better understanding of where we are coming from and where we are possibly where we are going. That's my encouragement to us today. So on this day, I said, hope I have given some parting words from my knowledge. And you can read about some of the things that I've said. Get into the libraries and expand your mind, because the history of things is somewhat fuzzy when other people write the books for us. But when you get some of the books that some of the great people have put out since and over the years, you'll find out that the history that is out there is not good in certain parts. Some of the history. And coming up with AI now, we're going to be in trouble. We're going to be in serious trouble if we don't know our foundation. So, Shippy the Explorer is saying, I hope you pick up some of the history that I've tried to partake here today. And the core thing is that you live your life to the fullest. Be happy, be educated, be informed, and don't stress yourself out. So happy Martin Luther King's Day, and go out or stay in and live the day to a great extent. Make it a positive day in your life. Like, share, and subscribe to Shippy the Explorer. And I see you on the next tape, on the next video. I call them tape, old British thing. See you. Have fun. Bye for now.